I was 22 years old, attending a Halloween party at my former best friend Nick's house. Nick was known for throwing extravagant Halloween parties every year. However, this year's event promised to be the most terrifying one yet. The mansion, Hollow House, loomed like a foreboding shadow against the night sky. As we entered the mansion, an unsettling atmosphere settled over the party. The clock struck midnight, and then it happened. All the lights went out. Darkness enveloped us, and the once lively laughter turned into hushed whispers of fear. An unspoken agreement led us to investigate the source of the blackout. Nick, who had been confident and in control earlier, now led the way with trepidation. We ventured through the darkened house, our footsteps echoing eerily. It felt as if we had stepped into a nightmare. But the true horrors were yet to come. Objects defied gravity, levitating and twisting as if guided by malevolent forces. Ghostly whispers filled the air, and the walls pulsated with an otherworldly malevolence. Shadows danced at the edges of our vision, and an indescribable panic gripped us. Nick's confidence crumbled, and his facade of bravado dissolved. Desperation drove us to communicate with these unseen entities, begging for answers. Their replies were cryptic and unsettling, hinting at a presence beyond our understanding. Nick, now an unwilling intermediary between our world and the supernatural, teetered on the brink of madness. The supernatural terrors escalated, each more horrifying than the last. Reality itself seemed to fracture, and we were adrift in a maelstrom of terror. Nick's bravado had given way to an all-encompassing fear that clung to us like a malevolent specter. Hours stretched into an eternity of terror, and then, with a final blood-curdling crescendo, the sinister phenomena ceased. We were left trembling and broken, our souls tainted beyond redemption. Hollow House had become a malevolent abyss, a place of unspeakable horror. The police arrived, summoned by terrified neighbors who had heard our screams. Attempting to explain the unexplainable was futile. Hollow House had become a nexus of unsolvable enigmas, a portal to a nightmare realm. In the aftermath, the memory of that accursed Halloween night clung to us like a relentless shadow. Nick, forever changed by the experience, delved into the darkest realms of the paranormal, driven by an insatiable need for answers. As for me, the chilling truth remained. Sometimes the boundary between reality and the supernatural blurs in a whirlwind of horror, shattering our perceptions of the world. That night had unveiled the malevolent secrets that lurk in the shadows, waiting to devour our sanity and plunge us into an abyss of unending nightmare. The malevolent secrets of Hollow House continued to haunt our every thought. Nick, forever changed by the experience, became obsessed with the darkness that had enveloped the mansion on that accursed Halloween night. He delved into the darkest realms of the paranormal, driven by an insatiable need for answers. The whispers of the supernatural had left their mark on each of us, a gnawing fear that refused to abate. Sleepless nights were filled with nightmares, and our waking hours were plagued by the memory of the inexplicable horrors we had witnessed. In the weeks that followed, Nick's investigation into the supernatural led him to consult experts in the field. He scoured ancient texts and delved into occult knowledge that most would dare not tread. The mansion, now a symbol of dread, became a laboratory for his obsession. As he unraveled the mysteries of Hollow House, Nick's descent into madness became increasingly evident. He spoke of entities that existed beyond our understanding, of a malevolent force that had chosen the mansion as its vessel. His once intelligent eyes were now clouded by a manic fervor. The revelations he uncovered were chilling. The history of Hollow House was steeped in darkness, a chronicle of tragedy and malevolence that spanned centuries. The mansion had been a place of unspeakable horrors long before our ill-fated Halloween night. Nick's obsession led him to confront the supernatural forces that still clung to Hollow House. He conducted rituals, attempting to communicate with the entities that dwelled within its walls. Each attempt pushed him further into the abyss of madness. One fateful night, as a storm raged outside, Nick's final ritual reached its crescendo. The mansion seemed to come alive, its very foundations quaking with anger. The air was charged with an otherworldly energy, and we watched in horror as Nick's eyes glowed with an unnatural light. In that moment, the malevolent force that had plagued Hollow House manifested itself before us. A shadowy figure, twisted and grotesque, emerged from the depths of the mansion. It emanated an aura of pure malevolence, a presence that defied description. Nick, in his mad pursuit of answers, had unwittingly unleashed the very evil he had sought to understand. The entity, free from its spectral prison, roared with a deafening, otherworldly sound. It lunged at Nick, its form shifting and contorting, and in an instant, he was consumed by darkness. The mansion itself seemed to rebel against the unleashed evil. Walls cracked and windows shattered. It was as though the very fabric of reality was tearing apart. We fled the mansion, our minds shattered by the horrors we had witnessed. The police returned to Hollow House, but there was nothing left to investigate. The mansion had become a crumbling ruin, a testament to the malevolent force that had once dwelled within its walls. Nick was gone, consumed by the darkness he had unleashed. In the years that followed, the memory of that Halloween night haunted each of us. Hollow House, now a place of unspeakable horror, was abandoned and left to decay. It stood as a warning, a testament to the darkness that lurks in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to consume the unwary. As for me, I could never escape the chilling truth. Sometimes curiosity leads us down a path from which there is no return. That Halloween night had revealed the malevolent secrets that lurk in the darkest corners of existence, waiting to devour our sanity and plunge us into an abyss of unending nightmare. Halloween night had finally arrived, and the excitement was palpable in our household. I had taken my sweet 7-year-old daughter, Lily, trick-or-treating for a few hours earlier. We roamed the neighborhood, collecting candies and sharing giggles with other costumed children. As the evening wore on, we returned home, our bags filled with sugary treasures. After our adventure, I prepared a simple dinner for us, and we sat down to watch some light-hearted Halloween cartoons on TV. Lily's eyes sparkled with delight as she munched on her favorite treats. The clock seemed to tick slower that night, and eventually, it was time for her to head off to bed. With a goodnight kiss, I tucked her in, ensuring she was cozy and warm beneath her Halloween-themed blankets. She was tired, but still filled with the joy of the night's festivities. I wished her sweet dreams and left her room, closing the door softly behind me. Settling into my own bed, I expected a peaceful night's sleep. However, as the night deepened, an uneasy tension began to settle in the atmosphere. The clock on the wall struck midnight, and that's when it happened. All the lights in the house suddenly went out. Darkness enveloped us like a heavy, suffocating shroud. The house, once alive with laughter and the buzz of Halloween excitement, became eerily silent. Even the guests who had been enjoying our Halloween gathering fell into an unsettling hush. It was as if a shadow had fallen over the entire evening. An unspoken consensus drove us to investigate the source of the blackout. Lily, who had been filled with excitement earlier, clung to my hand with trembling fingers. With cautious steps, we ventured through the inky blackness of the house, our footsteps echoing like distant thunder. It felt as though we had unwittingly crossed into a realm of nightmares. As we moved further into the darkened house, an ominous sensation crept over us. Objects within the house seemed to defy gravity, levitating and twisting as if guided by malevolent hands. Ghostly murmurs clawed at our minds, and the walls themselves pulsed with an otherworldly malevolence. Shadows slinked in the corners of our vision, and an indescribable panic seized us. Driven by desperation, we attempted to communicate with these unseen entities, beseeching them for answers. However, their replies were cryptic and unsettling, hinting at a presence from a dimension beyond our comprehension. My protective instincts kicked in, and I clung to Lily as Mark's leadership crumbled, his facade of bravado dissolving like brittle parchment. The supernatural terrors escalated, each more horrifying than the last. Reality itself seemed to fracture, and we were cast adrift in a maelstrom of terror. Mark, who had once projected confidence, had become a trembling shadow of his former self. Fear clung to us like a malevolent specter, and our hearts pounded with dread. Hours stretched into an eternity of terror, and then, with a final blood-curdling crescendo, the sinister phenomena ceased. We were left trembling and broken, our souls tainted beyond redemption. Hollow House had become a malevolent abyss, a place of unspeakable horror that defied all logic. The arrival of the police, summoned by terrified neighbors who had heard our screams, did little to alleviate our fears. Attempting to explain the unexplainable was an exercise in futility. Hollow House had become a nexus of unsolvable enigmas, a portal to a nightmare realm that defied all reason. In the aftermath, the memory of that accursed Halloween night clung to us like a relentless shadow. Lily and I, forever changed by the experience, were haunted by the chilling truth. Sometimes the boundary between reality and the supernatural blurs in a whirlwind of horror, shattering our perceptions of the world. That night had unveiled the malevolent secrets that lurk in the shadows, waiting to devour our sanity and plunge us into an abyss of unending nightmare. I was never really a big Halloween person, mainly because I grew up without many friends. As I grew older, it became less acceptable to go trick-or-treating with my mom, and I certainly didn't have any friends to go with. So, when Halloween rolled around last year, and I was a 14-year-old with no concrete plans, it seemed like I'd be spending the evening alone at home. However, things took an unexpected turn that evening when my mom asked me to stay home and hand out candy to the trick-or-treaters. Suddenly, I felt like I had a job to do, something that didn't involve me being the lonely kid without plans. My mom left with my little sister, Emily, who was only 8, to go trick-or-treating in our neighborhood. My one good friend Alex had other plans, and I didn't want to impose on him. My mom left at about 6 o'clock, roughly an hour after she got home from work. She told me to expect them back around 9 wild. I settled on the couch in the living room, watching a scary movie marathon on TV, and occasionally, I'd get up to answer the door and distribute candies to the neighborhood kids. As the night wore on, things started to take a creepy turn. The clock ticked past 9 wide, and I noticed the doorbell ringing less frequently. The darkness outside grew thicker, and the spooky atmosphere intensified. That's when the strange phone calls began. The kitchen phone rang, its ringer set so loud that it made me jump. I picked it up, but the other end remained eerily silent, save for some fumbling and background noise, like someone holding a phone without speaking. I said hello several times, but the person on the other end hung up without uttering a word. I dismissed it as a Halloween prank call, not letting it bother me. I continued watching the TV show, waiting for the doorbell to ring again with more trick-or-treaters. It wasn't long before the phone rang once more, the same unknown number on the caller ID. Despite my better judgment, I answered it. Again, silence greeted me, except for that faint, eerie breathing. Frustrated, I assumed it was Alex playing a trick on me. "Okay, Alex, I know it's you," I stated firmly into the phone, but the caller hung up again. I was starting to get annoyed. It didn't sound like Alex at all. The eerie feeling grew stronger. A long while passed with no further calls. The night grew darker, and the doorbell rang less frequently. I was engrossed in a classic horror movie when the phone rang once more, that same unnerving number on the caller ID. Curiosity got the better of me, and I reluctantly picked up. This time, the silence was accompanied by that chilling breathing and faint fumbling sounds. I waited, growing increasingly uneasy, until the caller finally spoke in a deep, exaggerated voice. "I'll be paying you a visit tonight," they declared menacingly. Annoyance gave way to fear, and I angrily told them to off before hanging up. I decided not to answer if they called again, promising myself not to let it get to me. Roughly half an hour later, a sudden blackout plunged the house into total darkness. The lights went out, the TV turned off, and I found myself standing frozen in fear. My heart raced as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Then, I heard it, an angry thumping at the front door. My fear intensified as I realized there was someone outside, pounding on the door. I began to scream, my panic growing with each passing second. But the truly disturbing part was the laughter. It was unmistakable, a laughter I recognized. I hesitated for a moment, and then I did something I would later regret. I opened the door. Standing there was Steve, my supposed friend. Fueled by anger and fear, I shoved him nearly down the front steps. So it was you who made those stupid phone calls? I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and relief. Steve nodded, still chuckling. Yeah, it was just a prank, man. His response didn't sit right with me. It didn't sound like you on the phone, I said, suspicion creeping in. Steve looked genuinely confused. What are you talking about? I didn't say anything, you idiot. I just called in and did some heavy breathing. At that moment, my heart sank. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had been fooled. I had assumed it was Steve, but he had been with me the whole time. My fear returned in full force. I asked Steve to follow me to the fuse box outside the house. As I feared, it had been tampered with, and all the wires had been deliberately cut. Panic coursed through me as I realized the severity of the situation. I called my mom, who told us to stay inside and wait for the police. She then contacted the authorities, and they traced the call to a payphone outside a nearby bar. The police arrived, and an investigation began. It turned out to be a Halloween prank taken to a dangerous extreme. As I reflected on that unsettling Halloween night, I couldn't help but wonder, was it just a dumb prank gone too far, or was it a potential break-in and something far more sinister waiting to happen? I couldn't be certain, but one thing was clear. I would never take Halloween for granted again.